So, hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to this session. Today we will present you the work on the RDA MaLDReTH II working group, which is about the mapping of the landscape of digital research tools. It's a number 2 group. So first I would like to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands we met, and we pay our respect to their elders, past and present. So for those who don't know ARDA, so ARDA is a community-driven, non-profit and technological neutral platform. It supports openness, but also consensus, harmonization, and inclusivity of data-related activities. So on the agenda, we will introduce you the work of the MaLDReTH II working group, and also provide you a introduction of the PRISM tool that one of the co-chairs developed, and also the integration with the GAR2 working group, and also we have the time for the discussion. So 2 days ago, Hilary provided a short introduction of the MaLDReTH working group, so I copy-paste the slide that she showed, but this is the MaLDReTH I working group, and today we will present the continuous of the activity on the MaLDReTH II working group. So please go on the notes and add your name, please. That would be really, really great, so we can keep in touch after that. So here are the co-chairs. So we have Rory that will present today, Adam that creates the tool, Halle and Maria that are really, really helpful but cannot attend today. And the working group is also have some help from the RDA Tiger projects that provide support on their activities. So now we can start. Rory.
Hi, thanks Nina, and welcome from me to everyone. Thanks very much for coming and joining the group. It's great to see there's a lot of new people, new faces, so that's excellent as well. So yes, so this is, as Nina said, this is MaLDReTH II. So we are the successor to, there's no automatic, and those of you who've gone through the approval process know all too well, there's no such thing as automatic continuation of working groups. You have to apply and create a new working group. So this is a successor to the working group, but in fact the work is a continuation of the work. So I'm going to start by telling, because since there are a lot of new people in the room, I don't think it will be too repetitive for most of you, to talk a little bit about what we did last year and to talk about the MaLDReTH map of the digital research tools. So we began. It was a multi-stage process. So we began by coming up with a harmonized version of the research data lifecycle, of which, of course, everyone's familiar, and there are hundreds, literally hundreds of different versions of the research data lifecycle. We did not want to recreate the wheel. That wasn't the point. But we tried to do a survey of different versions and come up with what we called a harmonized version, which we could use for ourselves. So that was the first stage of the work last year, and there were 11 phases that were identified. And this, when I say we, this was very much a kind of a classic example of the RDA at work. So the co-chairs were involved, but we had regular offline meetings, and I think more than 100 people were involved in this exercise over the course of the year. And then and you can see up on the screen there, examples of 3 of the stages: conceptualize, plan, and collect. And then for each stage, the group identified 3 categories of tools which are typically used in that stage. So a pretty obvious example, in the planning stage, data management planning tools are used. That's a good example. In the sharing phase, data repository. So to give you a sense of what that was all about. And then we drilled down a little bit deeper and said, okay, for each category of tool, let's come up with 3 actual tools, which again are representative or typical of that category. And so I don't think you can see, oh, you probably can read it. So you can see some examples of actual tools there. So that's what the MaLDReTH is. You have 11 phases, 33 categories of tools, and then 99 actual tools. So that's a map. I think it's fair to say at the end of last year, it was in a fairly unwieldy form. It was all in a spreadsheet, which is great. But as CJ and I have grappled with this issue of spreadsheets are great up to a point. but they actually aren't user-friendly at all, and certainly not if you're trying to go beyond what's just listed on the page. So this is just another. This is we were also felt we were a little bit graphics challenged, but we did come up with some graphics to try to give more of a sense of what we were doing, and this is another way of representing high level what we did last year. I'm not quite sure why this picture of our space is here. It was actually Maria which put these slides together, one of the co-chairs, but I think this is an example of a tool which actually tries to interoperate with tools at other phases of the life cycle. I believe that's why that's been put there. So what is MaLDReTH and who benefits from it? Well, we think of it as like a conceptual. It's not meant to be a registry or a list. That's not the point. It's more a conceptual scaffolding of digital research tools. Some of the ways in which it could be put to use, and again, if you create something, you never know who's going to use it, so it isn't really it's not your right to tell people how to use it, it's how people end up using it. But we think of this as being particularly useful for, and it's already being used by, for example, universities that are assessing their own research infrastructure. So Oxford and UCL are two examples of universities who have used MaLDReTH to kind of benchmark against what they have. Are there gaps? Are there things which they're using which are useful? It's also being adopted by people who are putting together research infrastructures. So, for example, some of the groups that are putting together EOSC nodes for their countries are using MaLDReTH as a reference for the kind of things they might or might not want to incorporate in the infrastructure. It could be a useful tool for data stewards. So these are some of the things that we'll see in how it plays out in practice, but those are some of the things which are already happening. So again, I think this first two parts of this slide I've already covered, and I'll talk about PRISM in a minute. So PRISM is actually an interactive tool which is helping us to move well beyond the spreadsheet, as you'll see, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So that was MaLDReTH I. So that's kind of where we were. We're about 6 months into MaLDReTH II. And I have to say, this has been it's been a journey of discovery, and we're quite at a dynamic stage. I think we've kind of settled down now, so we've made in many ways less actual progress during the first 6 months than we would have hoped. But I think we've also put in place a platform for doing some exciting things in the following 12 months of our remaining lifetime. So the major focuses of MaLDReTH II are to look at interoperability. Okay, we've got this scaffolding now with all these categories of tools and these research tools, but tool interoperability is a critical, arguably the critical element in moving beyond the kind of very siloed approach which unfortunately many tools and users of tools are forced into these days. So we're focusing on looking at tool interoperability, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And looking longer term, we're also thinking about sustainability. Okay, we've come up with a hopefully useful model and a tool for interacting with the model, but an RDA working group is not really intended to be a long-term home for something like this. So sustainability is also something we haven't really looked at it that much, but we will be looking at it. And again, this year, as with last year, it's a community project. It's co-designed, so we can only do this work if we have lots of active people who are involved in it. And so far, I must say we haven't had that many, but we've had a number of fantastic contributors who've joined the group and are already proving instrumental. So hopefully some of you will join us in our ongoing activities as well. So yeah, I think I've covered this as well. So our deliverables, again, interoperability, again, improving some of the documentation, developing a sustainability strategy, and looking at different ways in which the tool might be adopted on an ongoing basis. The other thing I haven't mentioned, which is also a very important activity this year, is our collaboration with the GORC group. And I don't even think the GORC group at this point needs any introduction because people are pretty familiar with GORC. CJ, who's one of the two people who really drove the whole GORC project and continues to drive it, is going to talk today about another important activity of MaLDReTH II, which is closer collaboration with the GORC and actually incorporating MaLDReTH into the GORC model, which could be one aspect of sustainability as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing CJ tell you a bit more about that. Yeah, so please, just, you know, hopefully this pitch will be more effective after you hear more about what we're doing, but we'd be delighted if you come and join us. And we have monthly online sessions where we're going through some of the work on interoperability, and we occasionally have sessions outside the sessions as well. We haven't set up formal task forces yet because we haven't had that many people involved that we can really justify setting up special task forces. That could be an option, but we have monthly online meetings, and if you just want to keep up to date with what we're doing, then you just need to join the group, and I'm sure you all know how to join an RDA group, and then you'll get notifications about meetings, and then of course we're extremely happy if you join. And I think one of the main benefits for joining is that it's not so much the work you do that's interesting, but it's the other people you meet. And we've got some fantastic contributors who are involved, and I think they're the kind of people that I've enjoyed meeting them, and I've kind of people that everybody would enjoy meeting and working with. Yeah, so this is just some information about contract and resources. Now, I'm going to give a little preamble to this because I think this is actually quite a remarkable thing that's happened. I don't know if any of you know Adam Moore, who's one of our co-chairs, who was until recently with JISC in the UK. Adam is an extraordinarily talented person and also incredibly generous with his time. And he has, this is unexpected, but Adam has created an interactive tool which is allowing us to present and allowing users to interact with and engage with the MaLDReTH map in a really incredible way. I think it's kind of late alpha, I would say, but you'll see when you see unfortunately Adam couldn't be here today, but he's done a video introducing Prism, which is the tool I'm referring to, and in the video, Adam gives you a QR code, so it's actually available for people to begin to play around with. So without further ado, I'm going to play Adam's video, and we can all learn about Prism.
Hello, I'm Dr. Adam Vials Moore, and I'm a co-chair of the MaLDReTH.
See if we're getting any sound here.
Working group.
Are we not?
Today I'm going to introduce.
Oh, it's too low. Yeah, any way we can get the sound up? Or can we just?
Prism is a web-based tool designed to help researchers discover and understand how digital research tools interact across the entire research.
Any chance we can get greater sound volume?
You can access the current live version.
I knew this would happen.
Hi there, my name's Dr. Adam Vials Moore, and this is a quick look at features that are... Hi there, my name's Dr. Adam Vials Moore, and...
Okay.
There are subtitles automatically generated, so if we can't get the sound,
Hello.
The subtitles aren't too bad.
I'm Dr. Adam Vials Moore,
Yeah, I think we tried second video.
and I'm a co-chair of the MaLDReTH II RDA working group.
Yeah, I think we just have
Today
to
I'm
do the
going
subtitles.
to introduce Prism, the platform for research infrastructure synergy mapping. Prism is a web-based tool designed to help researchers discover and understand how digital research tools interact across the entire research data lifecycle. You can access the current live version using the QR code that is currently displayed. Why do we need Prism? Well, the research data landscape is complex. There are hundreds of digital tools available, from data collection platforms to preservation repositories. But it's really difficult to know which tools work together, how they integrate, and where they fit in your research workflow. And that's where Prism comes in. we're building a comprehensive map of tool interactions across the stages of the research data lifecycle that we defined in the first MaLDReTH RDA working group. So just a brief overview, the MaLDReTH lifecycle model is stages that are taken from many different research data lifecycle models. Then they were harmonized, and we got these stages here. Starting with conceptualize, plan, collect, process, analyze, store, publish, preserve, share, access, transform, and then it's a cycle back to conceptualize. Each stage contains multiple tools. So, for example, in plan, we have 3 sub-stages, sub-types of tools: data management planning, project planning, and combined DMP projects. And then inside those tool categories for the stage, there are examples. And again, all of this is work that you can access from the first MaLDReTH working group outputs. In the current version of Prism, we have all of the tools from that first working group. You can examine all of the tools for a particular stage, and each of the tools you can view individually. You can add interactions, view the current interactions, and you can edit the details of the tool. If you want to understand the various components of the research data lifecycle and the tools that we have various visualizations built into Prism. We have the initial overview of the research data lifecycle. And again, each of these tools are linked to the live entry in the Prism system. You can also view visualizations that are based on all of the information stored in Prism. So here we have the collect and each of the tools for collect. At any time on the Prism homepage, you can see the interactions that have been created, the tools, you can export them, and again, we have an overview of the research data lifecycle stages. You can add an interaction where you can view the interactions. So let's have a quick look at adding a new interaction. Each interaction has a source and a target, an interaction type, and again, these interaction types are being defined by the current MaLDReTH II working group. The interaction has a lifecycle stage, a description. We can capture the technical details, benefits, challenges, examples, and then there's some metadata around who has entered the tool or how to contact the person who's responsible for the tool, and again, your name if you're entering it. Each of the fields has a tooltip so that you understand what particular information we are looking to capture. And the level of detail that we have helps researchers understand not just that tools connect, but how they connect, and then whether that'll work for their needs. The idea behind PRISM is that it's a community-driven interaction capture. All the PRISM data is openly accessible. You can export the entire catalog and all the interactions as CSV. We also have APIs. And you can see, if you go onto the information structures, the schema for the database, the relationships and so on, and the fields for the CSV, and of course, again, the research data lifecycle stages from MaLDReTH. And here we have, for those stages, the definition from the first working group. PRISM is in Postgres, SQLite. It's a Flask system. And it sits under an Apache 2 license in GitHub. So that's a basic overview of PRISM, a platform to discover, understand, and document how research data tools interact. If you're a researcher trying to find the right tools, a tool developer wanting to highlight integrations, or an infrastructure provider mapping your ecosystem, we hope that PRISM provides the comprehensive view you need. We invite you to explore the catalog, add interactions you know about, share feedback on what's useful or missing, and join our RDA MaLDReTH II working group. And again, you can access the current live version of PRISM. Use this QR code, and that will take you directly there.
Perfect. Okay. So just before I introduce CJ, I have to say, I think you can all see why we feel privileged to have Adam as part of this group. I don't think anyone ever has done anything like that in the history of the RDA, so it's beyond awesome. So it's amazing to have the chance to work with him. And we'll come back to PRISM at the end. So, but before we open it up for discussion, I'm also privileged and happy to have my friend and colleague CJ here, who's really one of the people that created and continues to drive forward the GORC, and he's going to tell a little bit about how we're working together with the two groups to try to hopefully make 1 + 1 = 3.
Excellent. Thanks, Rory. Just a moment on PRISM for just a second. I know that might bring us a little over time, but it's been really incredible to watch that come into creation, and it's something that we're actively looking for the GORC working groups as well to say, like, how do we use this visualization that Adam's developed for MaLDReTH, but also beyond it, because it's really an incredible piece of work. Okay, so nice. Okay, I can use the arrow keys. So what I'm going to go over is, what is GORC, the motivations for it, and why we thought that it was a good idea to create a task force between the GORC initiative and the MaLDReTH initiative. So the goals of GORC are really interoperability. This is a set of slides that I haven't shown yet during IDW, so this is new and different. But the goal of GORC is really this international interoperability. We want to move infrastructures in a direction where there's a common language that can be used to describe similar components, and where appropriate and possible with the right protocols and security compliance and all of this stuff, that researchers have access to the data they need and the resources they need when they need it. The GORC interest group was originally created as a neutral space for folks to come together who work in these infrastructures or want to develop these infrastructures to say, what are the common elements that we need to consider as a global initiative? So that was where the interest group came in, and they decided we're going to build a roadmap towards international interoperability. But before you can build a roadmap, you need to know what the roadmap contains, and that's where the working group came in. So there was the first GORC International Model Working Group that created the model, which is what you might consider as you're developing a commons, especially with that international interoperability focus. And then there's also model outputs, which is really what the GORC II Working Group is working on, more so around facilitating adoption, more about user documentation, mappings between similar models and frameworks, and then thematic slices for folks that are working in particular roles or looking at particular aspects of the model that they want to extract for their own purposes. So the idea is that the model feeds into this roadmap. The roadmap isn't developed. It's an active piece of work. I encourage you, if you're interested in helping us define what might be needed for international interoperability and then also how it's implemented, to check out the GORC interest group and working groups. This is what we're doing. And ideally, with the GORC International model informing the GORC interest group roadmap, it'll lead to international interoperability in an appropriate and equitable sense. Okay, the interest group developed the GORC typology, which was the first outputs that were created and kind of created the basis and foundation of everything else that we've done in this initiative. So there's a QR code there that brings you to the typology. And what the interest group found was that they made a definition of what a research commons is, why we're aiming for international interoperability, so kind of what I just said, but a little longer, and then what the essential elements are of a commons. So for our purposes within the GORC initiative, how we're defining a commons is it needs to have something in each of these essential elements. The human or social focused elements are the white hexagons along the top, with the technical or more hardware focused elements in blue along the bottom, and then a central element linking them together for standards. So you have things like your governance structures, your engagement, sustainability, not just in terms of money, by the way, that's sustainability of knowledge management as well, rules of participation and access, and human capacity, and then the technical elements, of course, of ICT infrastructure, which could include compute, storage, network, and authorization and authentication infrastructure, research objects, and services and tools. The international model, which was done by the working group, said, okay, this is the typology, this is where our starting point, this is the foundation. What are the considerations that are in behind those essential elements? Because there's a lot that can go into considerations for governance. There's a lot that could go into considerations for research objects, and so on and so forth. So the model identified about 400 considerations that live behind those essential elements. It isn't a spreadsheet, and as Rory's already highlighted, spreadsheets can be difficult to work with. So there is also some more friendly tools that we've developed. Unfortunately, not as friendly as Prism. As I said, that's kind of something that we'd like to explore more, and we do have a nice interactive web interface, which will be more public, especially in November, as it gets finalized and pushed out. But definitely check out the RDA recommendation, which is that left QR code, and the narrative profile template on the right-hand side, which are two of the main good starting points if you want to have a look at the international model and how you could think about adopting it or using it in your own context. Okay, so we do have task forces within the GORC2 working group. There's enough work to do that it doesn't make sense for the working group to kind of move along together on every individual thing. So what we did here with task forces was we said, okay, there are groups within RDA that we have very close alignments with, and we want to identify what those connections are and see how we can work together and not duplicate or have redundant work. So the two main ones that we have with the GORC2 working group right now are with the MaLDReTH II working group, which is what I'm going to be speaking to mostly, but then also with the National Data Services interest group. That session was actually earlier today, if you had a chance to catch it, where my colleague Andrew updated on that particular task force within the NDS IG breakout session. So what we found in these discussions between GORC and MaLDReTH, and I also want to highlight that, the groups do really work together outside of the task forces. We've been working together this whole time, but now we actually have a formalized mechanism of trying to figure out what those connections are formally. And what we found is that they do complement each other quite well, and this is why we're interested in figuring that out specifically. So MaLDReTH focuses on the practical day-to-day tools that researchers use in their work, and we saw Adam showcasing what some of those tools are and how they can be represented in Prism and how they can be navigated. It's folks besides researchers who are interested in kind of identifying them and figuring out how they might be implemented in their context, but it's at the level of this is what researchers need access to and what they might consider using. However, the GORC international model is not really intended for researchers to use or interact with directly. It's kind of those behind-the-scenes services and enabling services that your national research infrastructures or your program managers are actually implementing on the back end to make those tools available to researchers overall. So the purpose of the GORC MaLDReTH task force was to connect the initiatives more effectively. So right now we have two working groups, and the interest is really to say, are there areas that could be absorbed or moved into one working group or another? Are there ways that the models can complement each other and link back and forth for when someone might start in the GORC model and then move to MaLDReTH or vice versa? And then, I already said that, so help organizations decide when they want to use each model. And then what we really would like to do is say create guidelines on using them together. See cameras coming out. And then, of course, prevent duplicate efforts. All right, there we go. So what do we found? We did have a Lawrence workshop in July of 2025 where a lot of discussion was had around the GORC initiative, but then also specifically on the connection between MaLDReTH and GORC. And we were fortunate enough that Rory was able to attend, so that was really something that moved forward those discussions. One big output, and this is something that would be seen in the Lawrence workshop report too, so I'm not giving you any inside details, but we're thinking really about reconfiguring the GORC essential elements for ICT infrastructure and services and tools. So if GORC is really intended for folks to be thinking around how do we enable researchers to access the tools they need to do research, we kind of had shuffled everything together in the GORC model just under the framework of services and tools. So it was a little bit what would researchers actually see, but then also what would your back-end developers need to do as well. So we figured out, okay, maybe we need to actually split that. And so we're thinking about redefining those two elements, ICT infrastructure and services and tools, to align more so with what are enabling services that researchers don't interact with directly but are needed for them to do their research, and then what are the research-facing services that the researchers actually interact with directly. So in that kind of discussion, we realized that MaLDReTH is that core of research-facing services. It might completely encompass it, but that's part of our task force duties, is figuring out, does it completely encompass it? Is it the core of it with things around it? How do things fit together there? And so it's possibly subsuming the entirety of an essential element within GORC, the services and tools element. read the report from the workshop. There's more information there, but that was kind of our main starting point with this task force. So what we've done in the task force to date, we have in fact made a delineation between what's researcher facing and what's enabling, which was already a substantial amount of work. As I said, there were 400 considerations in the GORC model. One of the largest pieces of the GORC model is services and tools. So there was a lot of discussion in there. And we've identified a draft method for combining the models. We do think that MaLDReTH will kind of replace or be the core of the services and tools essential element, and then we'll have maybe a couple of narrative pieces around it that facilitate that moving between the models. So what we're currently doing is linking which aspects of GORC are represented in MaLDReTH and which aspects of MaLDReTH are represented in GORC, looking at those researcher-facing services and tools. This is going to help us decide on how we visually represent them and also how we technically represent them in each other. This is just a screenshot of our current working document. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to join the task force. And you can help us fill out the rest of this table. You'll notice that there's colors in the top half and not in the bottom half. That's because by the time we came to IDW, we'd gone halfway down the table. So we're trying to figure out how these things are going to fit together. I encourage you to join the task force if you'd like to contribute to that, because we need as many perspectives as we can get to make sure it's equitable and representative of the community. All right, next steps. So we want to complete this connection between MaLDReTH and GORC analysis, especially focusing on those research-facing services and tools. We want to determine which information is not captured by MaLDReTH specifically so that we can determine if that information moves somewhere else in GORC or in another format, or if it moves into MaLDReTH and MaLDReTH gets revamped. Those are kind of active discussions that we're having now. And we want to identify a connection mechanism between the two models, so it's really facilitating that user experience. We know we don't want things to live in a spreadsheet. So we have Prism for MaLDReTH, which has been excellent. We have a web interface for GORC, which is also excellent, but they're not the same thing. And they don't operate the same way. So then we're trying to figure out how do we actually have these models interoperate together from a user experience perspective is also part of the discussion. And the last piece of this is a huge change to the GORC international model. What we're suggesting here of basically destroying ICT infrastructure and services and tools and rebuilding them back up from this different perspective. So this is going to influence substantial changes, what we're hoping to then submit as a version 2.0 of the model, in addition to some of the other feedback that we have from our task groups and task forces in GORC 2 as well. And if you're interested in joining, which I've told you should do, you should email me or Rory, and our emails are in the collaborative notes, which if you haven't signed into, you absolutely should do that now. All right, so thank you for that, and I'll pass it back.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, CJ. That was actually really, really useful and interesting. So we've actually covered quite a bit of ground, I think. Just to recap, I gave a bit of a summary to the background of MaLDReTH, MaLDReTH II, how it came about, some of the things that we're trying to do this year at a high level. And then we saw Adam's video of the Prism tool that he's created, which I actually think that was quite useful because it hopefully reiterated, but also maybe got into a bit more detail about some of the interactions that we're really focusing on this year and looking at interoperability. And I think he put a bit of meat on the bone of what do we mean by interoperability. And then CJ gave us a view of GORC and then really focused on how GORC and MaLDReTH can come together. So I'm slightly regretting that we've waited until now to make this an interactive session, but it is what it is. We are where we are. So the rest of the time we have together is really an opportunity for us to discuss MaLDReTH. And I'm also just thinking there aren't that many people here. It might be a bit of an icebreaker if people would just go, we only have like 25 people, if we just fly around the room and everyone just says your name and what organization you work with, and then we'd kind of know each other a little bit. and then we can hopefully jump into some discussion. So if that's okay, can I start with over here? Yep.
Hi, I'm Jo Morris. I'm from Australian Research Data Commons.
Hi, I'm Mei Kodama. I'm from National Institute of Research of Japan.
Hi, Stéphane Guillou from the University of Queensland, the library technology trainer.
Hi, I'm Tony Burdett from Biofair in the UK. Don't know which way to go. Let's go this way.
Hi, I'm Wilma Karstorp. I work for TURN in Australia and at the University of Queensland.
Hi, I'm Philippa. I'm a research data librarian at the Queensland University of Technology.
Hi, I'm Becky Grady. I'm a product manager at the California Digital Library.
Hi everyone, I'm Connie Clare and I'm at the Research Data Alliance.
Hi, I'm Jerry Devine, Research Data Librarian at University of New South Wales.
Frankie Stevens, Independent Consultant in Research Infrastructure Services.
Hey, Francis Gashenga, University of Southern Queensland in Australia, and I am in the Research Infrastructure team. I manage our digital research infrastructure.
Graham Parton from the Environmental Data Service in the UK.
Hi, I'm Diewertje Bloemen and I work at KU Leuven as the repository manager.
Hello, I'm Lars Eklund. I'm with the National Bioinformatics Infrastructure in Sweden, and I'm also, in this context, I am the product owner for the development team of the visualization of the GORC model. So that visualization tool is what we work on right now.
Yes, my name is Sveinung Gundersen. I'm from Elixir, Norway.
Hello, Fernando Aguilar from the Spanish National Research Council.
Hello, I'm Tianrui Chuang from the Institute of Information Science, Academia Sinica in Taiwan. We run a research data repository called Deposita on top of the CCAN open source package. We are starting to look into data workflow automation. So that's the reason I'm interested in this interest group.
Hi there, my name is Ryan O'Connor. I work with RDA Europe, specifically on the RDA Tiger project, which is supporting both the MaLDReTH and GORC working groups.
Hi, I'm Josefin Nordling from CSE, IT Center for Science in Finland. I work as an open science specialist.
Hi, my name is Eng Cheng Luo. I work for the Terrestrial Ecosystem Research Network, aka TURN, based in Brisbane, Australia.
Okay, I think that's everyone. Thank you. Great. So that's an interesting mixture of people. So if I got it right, there's people from, some people doing roles in universities, in libraries and other aspects of research data management. There were some people from domain-specific infrastructures or organizations. Then there were some people from national organizations of various kinds that are looking at infrastructure, and at least one tools developer. Becky, thank you. So that's actually kind of interesting mix. That's exactly the kind of mix of people that we hope we'd come, and it's a great turnout. So let me start by throwing out a question to people who are involved in universities. So UCL and Oxford are the two examples we know of. There could be others that actually explicitly used MaLDReTH as a kind of a reference to think about the infrastructures and the tools they already have in place. So let me ask let me ask if someone from the universities, have your universities ever gone through such a kind of self-conscious exercise to look at the full list or panoply of research tools and services that you offer to your researchers? Has anyone gone through that, such an exercise? Yeah.
So this wasn't in my current job, it was my previous job, Macquarie University. One of the exercises that we did was we created an interactive tool for researchers to choose softwares that were available to them based on a range of filters. For example, are they working with sensitive data? And you could filter, and then that would show the tools available to you.
Great, thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think we unconsciously do it whenever we document what tools we have. So if you create a web page about the tools, you tend to put them into categories of the stereotypical research data lifecycle, which kind of is in line with the MaLDReTH model in many ways. So that's something that we do on occasion. But it does sometimes miss things like, is it able to handle personal data or not? So it's much more focused on the different phases of the typical life cycle.
So in Sweden we have many different initiatives that actually are doing that, and currently the university that I am at, Uppsala University, is actually doing that for the research data support. But we also have several sort of disparate that are kind of pieces here, pieces there, and how they all connect. But we are starting one very large effort in order to do that for the entire part of Sweden.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. So let me ask a follow-up question. When you have done these kind of exercises, has it been more on a tool-by-tool basis, or has there been any effort to look at interoperability between tools and to take a more workflow-driven approach, which is really what's behind MaLDReTH, and say how can tools interoperate and work together to support workflows? We think that's kind of a contribution or an innovation of MaLDReTH to take that approach. And that's really one of the main things which differentiates us from just lists of tools. So for the three people that I think it was three that gave those examples, when those exercises were gone through, was it more on a tool-by-tool basis, or was there any effort at looking at interoperability and seeing how workflows fit into it?
It's quite common when many different initiatives do the same thing. Yeah. We had some that are very focused on, like, this is the tool, and go from tool-based and up, and they are usually infrastructure initiated. And then we have a few that actually we are now looking at it from a workflow perspective rather than a tool-based perspective, looking at the researcher at center and then trying to define what it is. And MaLDReTH would be a great tool there for us, I think.
Yeah, for us, we did focus a lot on sort of interoperability when it comes to data exchange and data transfer between active data systems and repositories. So that's what our focus has been over the last couple of years, I would say, as we were building the repository and building our iRods and storage solutions. But now we realize that it needs so much more, like the DMP connection, that the DMP becomes useful by connecting it to your storage layers, by doing whatever, and really focusing on the workflows as well, not just on transferring data between your systems. Like, there's so much more in there, yeah.
Do you have any comment from Macquarie, or it's not relevant? Yeah.
I don't think we did any work in terms of interoperability. I think maybe crudely, so when I mentioned the fact that we could do different filters to look at the platforms that were available to you, one of those filters, or at least one of those views, was the data lifecycle. So I suppose in a crude way, for example, if you were a researcher working with sensitive data and you clicked on that filter, you then saw a map of the range of tools available in that space, from collection of data analysis through. But no, we didn't do any work in explicitly or explicit interoperation.
Okay, thanks. So thanks for the contributions from kind of the university experience or perspective. Why don't we now turn to, again, I can't remember exactly all of the organizations, but I think a number of people are involved in organizations which are either providing research infrastructure at a national level, I think that was the case, or if not providing them, they're maybe thinking about building them or providing them. So turning to that category of people, and I hope there are some that fall into that category. And I realize in many cases, some of the infrastructures may still be, whereas the university by definition has already lots of things in place. In other examples, it's more people are building them or thinking of building them. When you are, well, it'd just be interesting to get, for those that are involved in active projects to actually put something together, for which the GORC could be a broader umbrella, but MaLDReTH is more looking at the technical infrastructure. Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about what you're doing, the project, how you're going about it, and then I guess implicitly whether you think something like MaLDReTH could be useful as a reference, or whether maybe you're using another reference when you're doing it, or if not, how are you going about it?
Yeah, I can have a go at this one. So, yeah, Tony Burdett from BioFair in the UK. BioFair is a relatively new digital research infrastructure for the life sciences in the UK. I've been in post for just over 6 months. So we're still in a very early scoping out kind of phase. But we have been using the GORC model as kind of a North Star to sort of inspire the kind of way we think about the capabilities that BioFair needs to assemble and put together. Pulling together lots of sort of different fragmented pieces from the current landscape in the UK. I particularly like the MaLDReTH Research Data Lifecycle. We've been very much thinking about the sort of the technical underpinnings of that digital infrastructure as really needing to reflect data journeys rather than data repositories, and how they chain together. So it sort of without getting too detailed, because we're only just at the early stages of our journey, I think the kind of the conceptual idea of like linking these things together in terms of which point in the research life cycle tools and services are important at, like, totally resonates with what we're trying to achieve. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Tony. Any other examples? Anyone willing to say a few words?
So from the Environmental Data Service in the UK, it's a slightly different story. That the MaLDReTH sort of lifecycle model, I think we slot into part of it, but we don't have access to all of it, just where we sort of fit in. But I think that's one part of it. We do have challenges about what's upstream from where we are in the life cycle, and I think that might be really useful to help to construct the conversations with those other parts which we have to interact with to kind of help with that. So it's really nice to see. The other bit is that for ourselves, we've been on a journey for 10 years now, I'd say, of bringing together 5 disparate data centers to try and coalesce around common tools, and we're certainly looking how those ones can actually interoperate as well to provide parts of the life cycle which we manage. So that's been successful, but we're also hitting the case of you get so far and then you suddenly find that you have to change because costs suddenly rockets on tools.
I think there's one more in the front. Oh no, sorry. Yes.
can't remember the exact group you outlined, but I'll say I'm close enough. So for me, I work on a single tool, the DMP tool, which is outlined in this model. And so I can imagine using the MaLDReTH model and especially the interactions just, as a product manager to get a sense of, what else is out there and the interactions especially, or the integrations. So for me, it would be important to understand, like, okay, let's say hypothetically all of the other DMP service providers are interacting with a number of tools that we're not doing. That might indicate something that we are behind on and should be doing. If we're trying to decide integrations with repositories or electronic lab notebooks or something, if there's one that is interacting with a lot of other things that might show extra usage, or that's going to be a bigger contribution to our users to integrate with compared to something that is like completely siloed. It doesn't mean we wouldn't, just that, that would help get a sense of where things are already in place with integrations to help in my prioritization decisions.
Thanks, Becky. I was going to call on you next as a tools developer. So now we've got your perspective as well. So that's great. I don't think there are any other tools developers in the room, but I think that's. I think that's an important point. I think I'm always advocating this in terms of, I'm a big interoperability advocate, and I think if interoperability is going to become the norm as opposed to an exception, everybody needs to address it, and the tools developers need to address it. The tools adopters need to address it. The infrastructure creators need to address it, and the funders need to address it too. They need to stop just funding people to create yet another Me Too tool of something, and looking at workflow-driven resources which facilitate workflow-driven solutions, which oftentimes are going to involve more than one tool. But anyway, sorry for the little editorial comment there. But anyway, I agree with you, and I think it's a perspective which we can all pull into. All right, so maybe we can now turn from a little bit of kind of high-level perspectives on MaLDReTH and how it could be useful, and let me expose some of the challenges which we're facing as a working group, and possibly invite your thoughts on how we can address those challenges, and hopefully maybe some of you would actually be willing to continue contributing beyond this session. So, and again, we didn't really delve into it, but as you can see, there are potentially hundreds of interactions because you've got roughly 100 tools, and some of the tools, as Becky says, interact with multiple other tools. So the number of interactions is in the three figures, and the first we kind of jumped into, and if, again, you probably don't recall, but Adam showed you there's about 10 interoperability criteria or mechanisms which we're trying to assess for each interaction. So that's actually quite a labor-intensive process, as we discovered, and we were somehow thinking we would just fly through it. And we had a few sessions, and we had, again, incredibly useful, talented people who are working on it. And I would say it took us roughly, I guess no one else is here, but well, Anina's here. It took us, maybe 45 to 60 minutes to kind of get through one tool. Well, that's just not really scalable. So I think one of the issues which we're facing is thinking about how can we populate MaLDReTH, as you couldn't really see, but there are, I think, maybe, I don't know how many, but 6 to 12 interactions which have been documented, which kind of proves the concept, but it doesn't really fill out it's only going to be useful if it's more or less fully populated. So one of the challenges we're facing is how to address that scalability issue as we move forward. And one suggestion that has been made is that we should adopt some AI-assisted tool to kind of populate it at a gross, inaccurate level, and then do some human curation on what the AI tool comes up with. That's one suggestion. So if anyone has any thoughts on ways in which we can address this scalability issue, that would be really interesting for us to hear. And someone's already put their hand up. Thank you.
Well, I'm thinking of Prism. I was looking at it and how it's possible to add an interaction one by one, but well, I guess this is all very new to me. I didn't know about MaLDReTH or Gork before. It's all very exciting because it's very much something I'm interested in as a technology trainer, trying to promote open source tools to researchers. But one way I could think, maybe it's very basic and you've already thought of it, but is if an interaction is the capability of opening the same format in different tools, and you see that as an interaction, then having the schema integrating the formats that some tool supports would then automatically populate all the interactions, format-based interactions between the tools, if that makes sense.
You mean?
I'm just thinking, for example, say take a tool like LibreOffice, which would support probably 50 to 60 different formats of files. If we had just that list of formats and then the same thing for other tools, it would draw automatically links between those tools as interoperable to some extent.
Yeah, that's one. So that's one interoperability criteria. But to say we have about 10 or so.
Right.
So is there an API exchange? We don't want to limit the. We think those are important criteria, so we want to cover them, which we've done for, as I say, for a few interactions. So that's a good suggestion, but we still have the issue of how can we do it at scale. So Becky, you might, yeah.
Yeah, one possibility I could see here is thinking, and you may have already be doing this or thinking of this, is like the agile method, which is, deliver some user value incrementally. And so what it sounds to me, and I don't know that well, it sounds to me like trying to fill out all the details of this interaction for each one. And I'm looking at the form here. It's like, what type is it? What phase is it? What's the technical complexity, the description? And I could see why that would take a while to do for each one. As a user, it would be useful to me, not as useful as all that detail, but it would useful to literally just say there is a connection with no other detail. That's better than nothing. And so I can imagine the phases might be like, start with a really high level. There is some connection between these tools, and that can probably be done a lot quicker. And then kind of incrementally add value, like, okay, this is an API connection versus like a technical versus a social connection if you're doing those. And I put in the details that you know rather than requiring everything to be there at once. Also, once that's there, asking people to fill in their own things, I could imagine would work better, especially if there's something that shows blank fields or is wrong. People will probably be motivated to correct it, even if they don't do the work on their own. So, I can think of other aggregate tools. Like there's one that I signed up for recently, the Open Infra Finder, and that's one where there's like a ton of information that you have to fill out. But if they've got your thing and it's wrong, you want to correct that, and I worked with them to add in a little bit of information to get something there rather than having to have all of it there at once.
Those are two fantastic suggestions. I think it's in the interest of the tools providers to be listed, especially as MaLDReTH becomes more known. So asking them to fill things out. And the other suggestion is absolutely brilliant. So because it's the type of interactions which really is really labor intensive. And you can only do that if you have people in the discussion who are familiar with both tools, otherwise you can't do it. So some tools, great, you've got someone in the group who knows about it. What if you don't? Well, then you can't make any progress at all unless no one's going to go off and do like 3 hours of research to fill in one of these things. So I think the idea of having at the type of interactions, just yes, no at the top. That is actually absolutely brilliant. And you may have just opened the door to us getting a first version of this out quickly. Thank you, Becky. I owe you a beer. That is a great suggestion.
I want to comment on something because
please
bring up a bit of a concern to me because these tools are constantly changing. So I'm assuming this is not going to stay up to date. And you're kind of creating the issue that another working group is or has been trying to fix for repositories, where you talk about these registries like RE3 data and fair sharing, where repositories need to register information about the repository. It gets outdated, gets out of sync, and you have sort of these different information blocks floating around the web. And I'm sort of wondering if you're not creating the same thing for tools now about the interoperability, because I assume it's always going to improve. Things are going to become more interoperable, or sometimes connections between tools do not get sustained and they're no longer working, but they would still be in there. So I'm sort of wondering if maybe it would make sense to have a conversation with that RDA working group for the, I think it was the DROG working group, that looked at
which one?
The DROG, I think it was
DROG?
Data Repositories Attributes Common Attributes Working Group, where the idea is that it's not about people filling in information in this external tool, but rather that the tool repository, maybe for tools it's a bit more complicated, they have this information somewhere harvestable. So that DMP tool only needs to provide it in one place, maintain it in one place, and that's their responsibility. And then the likelihood of it being maintained and being in sync will be a lot higher, I think.
Yeah, those are really good points. I agree, and that, I mean, sustainability is one of the key things that we're looking at this year, this project. So I don't think there's any magic solutions really. So again, it may be a bit of a fiction, but again, just to restate, this is not meant to be a tool registry, unlike IOI, which someone said IOI, which is a tool registry. And I'm familiar with other registries, and as you say, the problem is no one keeps them up. So right, absolutely. This is meant to be more conceptual scaffolding, where the tools listed are examples. Having said that, it's the issue you described is still there, and new technologies are going to come up. And one which really struck me this week was Strava's talks about using AI to create metadata, which could transform the whole interoperability discussion. So fundamentally impact the way tools interoperate with each other in ways which we can barely, I personally at least, can barely conceive of, but can kind of see that it could be the case. So absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I think I don't think there are any easy issues, and it'd be great to talk to that group to find out what they're doing. One thing, I mean, I didn't quite understand. You said it would be great from a tool provider perspective if you could provide this information and somehow all the registries would pick it up, but that doesn't happen by magic. I mean, how would that happen? I'm not quite sure I understood. Becky? Yeah.
Well, I have an idea of what you meant, but if you would rather clarify, feel free to go first.
For the repositories, it's the idea that there's just a signposting JSON somewhere that the registries can harvest. But that's, again, different because it's about the instance of a repository.
Right.
Which is using a tool. Like, for example, Gaia Leuven would have a JSON that describes the Gaia Leuven dataverse, but it's not describing dataverse as a tool.
Right. And also that's for a category of tool which is kind of well organized, whereas we've got dozens of categories of tools which probably aren't organized, but yeah.
What I was imagining from what you said, because I thought it was a good point, is that, you know, I think that example of like, oh, a tool provider might keep that up to date somewhere, and can you harvest that rather than requiring them to update it for you? That is probably where AI, I think, is more likely to come in helpful, because everybody's going to do it differently. Like, you've got a JSON signpost, that's great. We might have an about page that says, we integrate with RSpace, you know, and they're going to be in very different formats, and that's probably going to be hard to get all of the tool providers to provide it in that same machine actionable format, but maybe like a, you know, in between machine and human. The one other thing I wanted to say about the registry, I think it's interesting you said you're not trying to build a registry, because I think the first example of MaLDReTH, you know, I feel like I understood well, is not a registry. It's about the scaffolding, the cycle. With Prism, and particularly with mapping these interactions, it looks like a registry to me, and that's why I mentioned InfoFinder. Kind of, you know, coming into this with just a little bit of information from what I saw here, I would think, oh, you now want to be a registry of interactions. And if that's not what you're trying to do, that might be just important in messaging or visuals. I don't really know how, but like trying to map all this out really seems like you are trying to make a comprehensive landscape of it. And so I thought that's what you were going for.
Yeah, just to comment a little bit more on this idea of sort of metadata harvesting around tools, that there is some examples in Elixir Europe. So there's the BioTools registry that's supported by Elixir, which is sort of a author maintained, who you have to sort of provide entries. But they are looking at integrating with bioschemas, which is schema.org markup, and that the bioschemas template does have a sort of a profile for computational tools. I was just having a look at it. It's pretty lightweight, but the idea here is exactly this kind of idea that the tool provider can provide some markup on their website or something structured in schema.org format that a tool can then harvest. And the Elixir training portal test does do that really, really effectively. So if you mark up your training materials with bioschemas training markup, then they're sort of automatically harvested and pulled into the test portal. So there's a reasonably good precedent for this kind of thing working reasonably well, and there's already a bioschemas profile. So that's something that
that's
might be
really
worth,
interesting,
worth investigating.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Yeah, I mean, I suppose to some extent these things are chicken and egg. I mean, think one, in my experience with other registries that I'm familiar with, they all get outdated, but that's because people don't use them very much. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. I mean, if MaLDReTH, and especially MaLDReTH and Gork, if MaLDReTH really takes off, then you'd be crazy if you're a tools provider not to keep your information updated, because it's a really useful portal for you. If it doesn't take off, then, well, why bother? So there's a bit of that, yeah.
So then that's an interesting question. What is MaLDReTH doing to address that communications challenge and that marketing, if you will?
Yeah, so I think at the moment that's not our major focus because we're still building MaLDReTH. However, I think this is my personal view, okay, but my personal view is that the collaboration with Gork is probably our most likely and most effective marketing channel, because Gork has been going quite a bit. I mean, Gork dates back to like basically 2016. I mean, the concept has been around for a long, long, long time, whereas MaLDReTH has only been going for 2 years. So we're well behind Gork. The synergy has been well identified, and we're working together. So from my point of view, well, Gork is there. If MaLDReTH is going to add value to Gork, which pretty clearly it is, why not combine forces and kind of go under the Gork umbrella and do our primary marketing through that? And then, of course, we'll see how it goes. I mean, maybe we'll say, look back in 2 years and say, well, these always should have been the same thing. They shouldn't even be separate. Let's just do it as a package, or we could do some marketing of our own. So the answer is we haven't done a lot of marketing really at this point, apart from thinking about Gork. And having said that, so the answer is not, but having said that, I was shocked to find that Oxford hired last year an external consultant and paid them a lot of money to review their infrastructure. And MaLDReTH is pretty primitive, and instructed them to use MaLDReTH as a reference. That's a pretty powerful example. I'm also aware of people who are building EOSC nodes for countries in Europe who've also used MaLDReTH. So there's something there. But again, it all comes down to resources. I mean, we're all doing this part-time. It's RDA. Look what Adam's done. Unbelievable that he created this tool, Prism. But we don't have time to go market it. So it's not really our major focus. And that's one of the sustainable. And I think that's an important point, because an RDA working group is not the appropriate vehicle for something like MaLDReTH. So something else we'd considered is to have an organization, SURF, something like that, and say, is this useful? They have resources and they can market it properly as well. So I think you're pointing to an issue, a weakness, but it's not one which we can very well address at this point.
Absolutely, and I think it was probably a little unfair, that question or statement anyway, because that's a challenge that RDA in terms of the uptake it's across many groups. So I'm looking at Connie, who's shaking her head, nodding her head. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe actually I have something else as well, but continuing on, when I initially looked at your first questions about MaLDReTH to discuss, it reminds me a lot of what the aim of the RISE framework is. which I think is being promoted by DCC, I think, which is the research infrastructure self-evaluation framework. But it's not as in-depth as MaLDReTH, and it's a bit more focused, I think, on data publication than it is on the overall tools. But I think the question again comes up, like, what is MaLDReTH? Is it moving in that direction of a registry of use cases, or is it going to be an evaluation framework which helps you to self-evaluate and then form a plan on how to improve your infrastructure? Because I would be tempted to say that it should be the second and not an overview of use cases. And that comes back to the first thing I wanted to say. I think the idea of a registry that comes up, but you're mentioning that that's not the intention, maybe it would be better to not focus on particular existing use cases, but rather to try and create some profiles and some sort of fake use case is the wrong word, but a couple of profiles or personas or whatever you want to call it, which are examples of tools and types of interoperability that exist for specific tools or combinations of interoperability, and use those as examples for the MaLDReTH model, and then work from that to prevent that people start to use MaLDReTH as a way to build a registry for tools, if that's not the intention.
Okay. All right.
But I think especially the RISE connection might be interesting to explore.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. CJ, yeah. You want to get the mic? Yeah.
I'll also stand up since I'm sitting in the front and can't see everybody, but just responding to this kind of discussion line around promotion and what is the purpose of MaLDReTH if it's not going to be a registry. This was also a question we had for Gork, because originally when we built the model, it was a lot of examples. Rory might remember that there was just tons and tons of examples, and we realized pretty quickly, and especially in more recent conversations, that there's the profiles that you can create that are specific instantiations of these concepts, so that work for a particular organization or work for a particular project or work for a particular group. But then there's the scaffolding on the back end that's kind of structuring these profiles. And so I think that maybe to Rory's point around some of the marketing can maybe be done through Gork, and I think that would actually be really helpful thinking about it from this angle, is because we've positioned Gork as a model. It's not a list of examples. We are building profiles to kind of showcase these examples of how things can be implemented in real life. But the model itself isn't the profile. It's not a full comprehensive list of every single way you can implement something. So maybe having MaLDReTH and the Gork model intertwined, or as a cohesive piece, would really help emphasize that. And then MaLDReTH has its own set of maybe profiles or examples underneath it. The way we've kind of thought about it is like a 3-tier system. You have the concept of a house. We probably have an idea of what that might look like, but then when you go into a particular country, they have specific regulations that you need to have your electrical work such and such a way, and your plumbing work such and such a way, and the height of the room, and this sort of thing. And then someone actually builds the house, and they pick the color of the paint. And they pick the color of the door, and they pick what they want on the front lawn, and this sort of thing. So we're thinking about it as Gork, and I would actually extend it to MaLDReTH, is what is a house? And then the specific examples and the registries are what color is the door? That's how we think. That's how we're kind of thinking about it. So maybe that is how we want to position it too.
Okay. Well, this has been a really great discussion. I really appreciate everyone's contributions and active participation, and I think hopefully we've been capturing some of this in the notes as well, because it's all really useful food for thought. Any other kind of concluding comments or thoughts or observations? Yeah.
I'm just thinking of contribution and the amount of work that there is with the interactions, for example, and thinking of, I know we're not trying not to paint it as a registry, but when I look at Prism, it makes me think of kind of what I was looking for as an alternative to a website like MaLDReTH II, which is a registry of lots of software that can be filtered with in lots of different ways. And I've been using that to find, for example, open source alternatives to proprietary tools for research. And I feel like that's a crowdsourced database, I guess. And I'm trying to think of what makes people contribute, right? I'm wondering if there could be also different levels of different kinds of data, some that are more populated by the working group, for example, whereas, for example, interactions could be crowdsourced, as long as there's a drive for people to contribute if they find the tool useful to their work, and if they feel like they're contributing to something worthwhile. I think there's a lot of potential there. So, looking at the tool right now, I feel like already in its current form, there's already interaction, as in putting data back into the system already built, and it is usable enough to be useful for a lot of people and institutions, I believe. So I feel like there is a lot of potential already for crowdsourced information.
Thank you. Now we need you and other people to actually start doing it. Yes, I mean, so I think also this is very new. I mean, what Adam showed was, he finished that video about 90 minutes ago. So up until this morning, it wasn't the case that people could put stuff in, but now they can. So please feel free to do so. And I think and tell other people about it. I imagine for the next, I'll come to, I just finished my thought, Becky. I imagine for the next period, the next few months anyway, the major progress we'll make is actually through the working group. So I think we'll start to make faster progress now that because before we were putting stuff in the spreadsheet, but even the fact that PRISM exists now is going to expedite things. So as I say, please come and join us. Jump into one of the working group meetings, and I think you'll enjoy it. It'll be fun, good people to work with. Before I wrap up, Becky has another comment or suggestion. Your question, okay.
So to aid in potential contributions, when I was looking through the PRISM form for like adding an interaction, you could add all these details and then you can say proposed or implemented or deprecated. And I'm unclear, does proposed mean like, I would like these two tools to interact, or does proposed mean, I think this interaction exists, but I want the working group to vet it?
Yeah, okay. So you're a software developer, right? We need a tooltip there to make that clear, I guess. Yeah. Yep. Great.
Do you know which it's meant to?
No, I don't know, because Adam has done this, so no, I don't.
Okay,
sorry,
okay.
I can't answer the question.
Okay, I got it.
But actually, I have to say, one of the things which came up in some of the early working group sessions was that some of the things that we're supposed to be doing weren't clear, and so you notice Adam said we've got tooltips now, so we are aware of the issue that we need to explain for people how to use it. So especially if they're using it on their own without the benefit of a group, things will be clearer. So yeah. Anyway, well, I think I should wrap up now because we're almost time. So as if this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for coming, and thanks for your active participation. And hopefully we'll see some of you again. So thanks very much.